The door to Lab C4 was open. Not unlocked. Not ajar. Open. I know because I'd sealed it myself 11 minutes earlier. Badge scan, manual lock, deadbolt confirmation. Green light. The system logged it at 10:47 p.m. At 10:58 p.m., the hallway camera showed it wide open. No one walked through it. I need to go back. I need to explain how this place works, because if I don't lay this out carefully, none of what happened will make sense. And I need it to make sense. I need someone, somewhere, to read this and tell me there's a rational explanation. Because the people I work with won't talk about it. And the people above them made sure we never would. I was hired as a security analyst for Meridian Applied Sciences in March of 2021. The facility is located about 40 miles outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming, in the kind of flat, windswept nothing where you can drive for 20 minutes and not see another building. The complex itself is mostly underground, 3 sublevels beneath a modest above-ground structure that looks like any other corporate research office. Badge access lobby, reception desk, a row of flags out front that no one ever straightens. I'd spent 6 years in private security before that. Corporate campuses, a stint at a pharmaceutical warehouse outside Denver, 2 years doing overnight monitoring for a logistics company with a server room the size of a gymnasium. I wasn't new to the work. I understood access protocols, surveillance systems, shift logs. I was good at being bored in the right way, alert without being anxious. That's what they said they wanted. My interview was surprisingly brief. 2 people, both in plain business attire, both with IDs that read only, MAS, admin. No first names. The questions were standard at first. Experience, certifications, willingness to relocate, comfort with overnight shifts. Then one of them, the woman on the left, short gray hair, reading glasses she never actually looked through, asked me something I hadn't heard before. How do you respond to information that contradicts your direct observation? I thought it was a behavioral question. Something about conflict resolution, maybe. I said I'd document both the observation and the contradicting information and escalate it for review. She wrote something down and nodded. That was it. They offered me the position the next day. My role was sublevel security analyst, night operations. The shift ran from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. The monitoring station was on sublevel 1, a small room with 8 screens, a desk, a console that controlled door access for all 3 sublevels, and a landline phone that connected only to the operations desk upstairs. No cell reception underground. No internet access. The console had its own closed system, logs, cameras, environmental sensors. Everything was self-contained. They were very clear about that during orientation. There were 2 other night analysts. Greger, who'd been there about a year, and Page, who'd been there 3. We rotated in pairs. 2 on, 1 off. Greger was quiet, ex-military, kept a thermos of black coffee and never once offered me any. Page was warmer but careful. She spoke about the facility the way people speak about a boss who might be listening. On my first night, Page walked me through the routine. Camera sweeps every 15 minutes. Environmental readouts logged on the hour. Door status checks every 30 minutes. Any amber or red alerts on the console were to be noted, time-stamped, and reported via the landline. She handed me a laminated card and told me to keep it in my front pocket at all times. I looked at it. It was a short list, 6 items, printed in plain black text on a white background. No header. No title. No signatures or document numbers. I read them. I read them again. Some of them were mundane. Some of them were not. These are protocols, Page said. Not guidelines. You follow them exactly. I asked her why the third one was phrased the way it was. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "You follow them exactly," again, the same way, the same inflection, and turned back to the monitors. I want to be careful here. I'm not going to list those 6 items. Not because I'm protecting Meridian. I couldn't care less about Meridian anymore. But because writing them out, presenting them as a neat little list, that would make this feel like something it wasn't. It would make it feel like a game. Like the kind of thing you'd read online at 2 a.m. and get a pleasant little chill from and then close the tab. This was not that. What I will tell you is that 4 of the 6 items were operationally logical. Lock certain doors at certain times. Don't enter specific sections without a partner. Report environmental fluctuations immediately. Fine. Normal. Any secure facility might have those. The other 2 didn't make operational sense. They were specific. Oddly specific. And they referred to things I hadn't seen yet, things the orientation never mentioned. When I tried to ask about them during my second week, Gregor cut me off before I finished the sentence. "You don't need to understand them," he said. "You need to follow them." That was the culture. Not hostile, not secretive in any dramatic way. Just closed. Like a machine that only works if you don't open the casing. So I didn't open it. Not at first. The first 3 months were uneventful. I settled into the rhythm the way you settle into any overnight job. You stop fighting the hours and start living inside them. The facility was quiet. Almost aggressively quiet. Sublevel 3 had some kind of acoustic dampening that went beyond normal soundproofing. When I did my walkthrough down there, I could hear my own pulse. The cameras were standard, grayscale, wide angle, decent resolution. Each sublevel had 12, covering corridors, lab entrances, storage bays, and the elevator vestibule. The feeds were stable. The system rarely glitched. Occasionally a camera would drop for a few seconds and come back. Normal behavior for closed circuit. I logged everything. Timestamps, observations, environmental readings. Temperature, humidity, air pressure for each sublevel. Sublevel 3 ran cooler than the others, usually around 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Page said that was standard. Something about the equipment down there needing lower ambient temperature. I believed her. Around my 4th month, I noticed something in the logs. Not on the cameras. In the numbers. I was reviewing the previous week's environmental data as part of a routine summary report. Sublevel 3's temperature had been fluctuating. Not dramatically, a degree or 2 per hour, but in a pattern that didn't match the HVAC cycle. The system down there ran on a fixed loop, cool for 45 minutes, idle for 15, repeat. You could set your watch by it. But 3 times that week, the temperature had dropped outside the cooling phase. 58 degrees Fahrenheit at 1 a.m. Normal. 56 degrees Fahrenheit at 1:12 a.m. HVAC idle. 54 degrees Fahrenheit at 1:19 a.m. Still idle. Then back to 58 degrees Fahrenheit at 1:45 a.m., right when the cooling phase kicked back in. I flagged it. Submitted a maintenance note through the console. The next morning, I got a response from the operations desk, reviewed. Within acceptable range. No action. Fine. Maybe the system had a passive bleed effect. Maybe the insulation was aging. I filed it and moved on. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Same pattern. Same corridor, the main throughway on sublevel 3, between Lab C4 and Storage Bay 7. Temperature dropping during the idle phase, then correcting itself when the HVAC resumed. But this time, the drop was steeper. 58 degrees Fahrenheit. 53 degrees Fahrenheit. 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Then back to 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I flagged it again. Same response, within acceptable range. No action. 49 degrees Fahrenheit was not within the acceptable range. I'd read the environmental protocol during orientation. The threshold for sublevel 3 was 54 degrees Fahrenheit minimum. Anything below that triggered a yellow advisory. No advisory had triggered. I mentioned it to Paige the next evening during shift overlap. She looked at me the way you look at someone who's just asked a question you were hoping they wouldn't. The sensors on that stretch are old, she said. They misread sometimes. Both of them. There were 2 sensors in that corridor. Both had logged the drop. Paige didn't answer. She picked up her coat, said good night, and left. I started watching that corridor more carefully. Not obsessively. I didn't rearrange my whole routine around it. But during my hourly rounds through the camera feeds, I'd linger on sublevel 3, corridor C, the stretch between C4 and Storage Bay 7. Most of the time, there was nothing. An empty gray hallway, institutional lighting, sealed doors on both sides. But on June 14th, at 2:13 a.m., I saw something I couldn't explain. I was cycling through the feeds. Sublevel 1, fine. Sublevel 2, fine. I switched to S3, CAM07, which covered the midpoint of Corridor C. The hallway was empty. I moved to S3, CAM08, which covered the far end, near Storage Bay 7. A figure was standing at the end of the corridor. Not moving. Not walking. Standing. Facing the camera. I leaned forward. The image was grayscale, slightly grainy at that distance, but the shape was clear. A person. Upright. Arms at their sides. In what looked like a standard lab coat. My first thought was that one of the research staff had stayed late. It happened occasionally, someone working past hours, cleared by the day shift. I checked the access log. No one had badged into sublevel 3 since 6:42 p.m., when the last researcher, Dr. Carla Voss, had exited through the elevator vestibule. Exited. Not entered. Her last log was going up. I switched back to S3, CAM07. The corridor midpoint was still empty. Back to S3, CAM08. Empty. The figure was gone. No motion blur. No transition frame. I rewound the feed 30 seconds. The figure was there at 2:13 and 4 seconds a.m. At 2:13 and 9 seconds a.m., the hallway was empty. 5 seconds. And in those 5 seconds, nothing moved. It was there, and then it wasn't. I sat back in my chair. The room was very quiet. I logged it. 2:13 a.m., unidentified figure observed on S3, CAM, 08. No access log entry. Figure no longer visible on subsequent check. Possible feed artifact. Requesting review. The next morning, the response came back, reviewed. Feed artifact confirmed. No action. I pulled up the raw footage file to review it again myself. The file for S3, CAM, 08 between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. was 11 minutes shorter than it should have been. I didn't tell Gregor. I considered it, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he never asked questions. Maybe it was the way Paige had looked at me when I mentioned the temperature drops. There was a weight in this building, a kind of gravitational pull towards silence, and the longer you worked there, the heavier it got. Instead, I started keeping a personal log. Nothing dramatic, a small notebook I kept in my jacket pocket. I wrote down everything the official console log recorded, and next to it, I wrote down what I actually observed. When those two things matched, I didn't think about it. When they didn't, I circled the entry. By the end of June, I had 14 circles. Most were small. Timestamps that didn't align, a door log showing a seal confirmation 2 minutes before I'd actually sealed it. A camera feed that showed a corridor light on when the electrical log said it was off. A humidity reading that jumped 6% in a single second, then corrected itself in the next reading. But 3 of the circles were larger. July 3rd, 11:48 p.m. I was doing my first walkthrough of sublevel 2. The corridor that connects the main elevator vestibule to the secondary lab wing is about 200 feet long, straight, well lit. I walked it at a normal pace. It took me roughly 90 seconds. When I returned to the monitoring station and checked the camera feed, the playback showed me entering the corridor at 11:48 p.m. and exiting at 11:54 p.m. 6 minutes. I timed my walk the next night. 92 seconds. The night after that, I watched myself on the feed as I walked the same corridor. On the monitor, I moved normally. No slowdown, no hesitation. But the timestamp on the feed advanced 4 minutes and 11 seconds during what my wristwatch measured as a minute and a half. Time was moving differently on the cameras. Or it was moving differently in the corridor. I wrote it down. I circled it. I didn't flag it on the console. Because by then, I understood something about this facility. The console didn't want accurate reports. It wanted clean ones. The system, the logs, the cameras, the environmental readouts, was not a tool for observation. It was a tool for agreement. You saw what it showed you, and you confirmed that what it showed you was normal. That was the job. And those 2 items on the laminated card, the ones that didn't make operational sense, I was beginning to understand them now. Not what they meant, exactly. But what they were for. They were for the moments when the system and reality disagreed. August came in dry and hot above ground, but underground it didn't matter. The facility had its own climate, its own rhythm. My shifts blurred together the way overnight shifts always do, each one identical until it isn't. August 9th, 1:33 a.m. I was alone in the monitoring station. Gregor was on his off rotation. I had the console, the screens, the landline, and the hum of the ventilation system, which had become so constant it functioned as silence. I was midway through my camera sweep when I noticed S3, CAM, 04 was showing something unusual. Camera 4 covered the entrance to Lab C4, the same lab I'd been paying extra attention to since the temperature anomalies. The door was closed. Sealed, according to the log. Green indicator light. But on the camera, the indicator light above the door was amber. I checked the console. Green. Sealed. No alerts. I looked at the camera. Amber. I toggled the feed to full screen. The image was clear. The small indicator panel above the C4 door showed an amber status light, the color that indicated the door was in transition. Not locked, not unlocked. Between states. The console said sealed. The camera said otherwise. I picked up the landline and called the operations desk. It rang 11 times. No answer. I hung up. Called again. 9 rings. Then a click. Operations. This is Analyst Moro, sublevel monitoring. I'm showing a discrepancy on Lab C4. Console reads green sealed, but S3 CAM04 shows an amber indicator. Silence on the line. Not dead air, I could hear the faint hiss of the connection. Someone was there. Operations, do you copy? Console reads green. Yes. Then C4 is sealed. Good night, Analyst. Click. I stared at the phone. I looked at the screen. The amber light was still on. I did something I shouldn't have done. Or maybe it was the only honest thing I did in that entire building. I went down to sublevel 3. The elevator ride takes about 45 seconds. The doors open onto a vestibule that smells faintly of ozone and something else, something I've never been able to name. Not chemical, exactly. Organic, maybe. Like the ghost of something biological that had been scrubbed away but left an imprint in the air. The corridor was cold. Not 58 degrees Fahrenheit cold. Noticeably cold. I could feel it through my jacket, through the thermal undershirt I'd started wearing after the first month. My breath didn't quite fog, but it was close. I walked toward Lab C4. My footsteps were the only sound. The acoustic dampening on this level swallowed everything, the ventilation, the electrical hum, even the subtle vibration of the building's infrastructure. Down here, the world was reduced to what was immediately in front of you. I reached the C4 door. The indicator light was green. I stood there for a long time. Green. Sealed. Just like the console said. I looked up at the camera, S3 CAM04, mounted in the ceiling corner to my left. Its small red recording light blinked steadily. I pulled out my radio and keyed the channel to the monitoring station, where the feed would be recording to the console. Moro. I'm standing in front of C4. Indicator is green. Can you confirm what S3 CAM04 is showing? Static. Then my own voice came back to me through the radio, distorted and thin. I hadn't transmitted yet when I keyed the radio. I'd heard my own message before I sent it. I lowered the radio. The corridor was very still. I looked at the door again. Green light. Sealed. Normal. Everything was normal. Except the temperature readout panel beside the door, a small digital display embedded in the wall that showed the ambient temperature of the immediate area. 41 degrees Fahrenheit. I turned around and walked back to the elevator. I did not run. I wanted to. But one of the items on the laminated card, the ones I'm not listing, was relevant here. And for the first time, I understood it not as a protocol but as a warning. I followed it exactly. When I got back to the monitoring station, I checked S3 CAM04 again. The indicator light on the feed was green. The temperature readout on the console for corridor C showed 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I pulled up the log for the last 20 minutes. According to the system, no one had accessed the sublevel 3 elevator during that time. I had not gone downstairs. According to the facility, I had been sitting at this console for the last 3 hours without interruption. I checked my boots. The soles were cold. There was a faint scuff of concrete dust on the left toe, the kind you pick up on sublevel 3, where the floor coating is older and slightly degraded. I had been there. My boots knew it. My skin knew it. The hairs on my arms were still standing up from the cold. But the system said no. I opened my notebook and wrote down everything. The amber light. The phone call. The temperature. The radio. The log discrepancy. I circled the entire page. Then I sat in my chair and watched the cameras until 6 a.m. Nothing else happened. Nothing ever happened on the record. September through November was a slow tightening. Not of events, of awareness. Once you start noticing the gaps between what the system says and what you experience, you can't stop. It's like discovering that the floor you've been walking on is a painting of a floor, and underneath it is something you can't see. I kept my notebook. The circles increased. Some were minor, a door log off by 30 seconds here, a camera glitch there. But some were not minor. On October 2nd, I logged a walkthrough of sublevel 2 at midnight. Normal sweep. Every door sealed, every corridor empty. When I reviewed the camera footage the next night, I watched myself walk the full length of the sublevel 2 main corridor. Normal pace, normal movement. Except at the 1:14 mark of the footage, I stopped. On the camera, I stopped walking. I stood still in the middle of the corridor for approximately 19 seconds. Then I turned my head to the left, toward the wall, and stood there for another 12 seconds. Then I resumed walking. I did not stop during that walkthrough. I remember it clearly. I walked straight through without pause. On the camera, I stopped. I turned. I looked at something on the wall. There is nothing on that section of wall. I checked. Bare concrete, painted gray. No signage, no panels, no fixtures. I watched the footage 4 times. Each time, I stopped. Each time, I turned. Each time, I looked. My face on the camera was too low resolution to read clearly. But my posture, the angle of my head, the stillness of my body, looked like someone listening. In November, Paige quit. She didn't announce it. Didn't say goodbye. I came in for my shift on a Tuesday and Gregor told me she'd submitted her resignation that morning. Effective immediately. No 2 weeks. No exit interview. I asked if she'd said why. Gregor unscrewed the cap of his thermos. People leave. After 3 years. Just like that. He poured his coffee. The steam rose in a thin, straight line. How long have you been keeping that notebook? I felt something cold that had nothing to do with the ventilation. I see you writing in it, he said. Every shift. After every sweep. You write, and then you circle things. He took a sip. Paige did the same thing. She had a blue notebook. Kept it in her left pocket. What happened to it? She stopped carrying it. Around month 8. Put it away and never took it out again. He looked at me. She got better after that. Calmer. Stopped asking questions. Did her job. Clean reports, clean logs. And then she quit. And then she quit. He set the thermos down. But she had a good run. Almost 3 years of clean reports. He turned back to the monitors, and the conversation was over. That night, I almost threw the notebook away. I held it over the small trash bin beside the console and stood there for maybe 2 full minutes. Then I put it back in my pocket. I couldn't stop. Not because I was brave. Because the notebook was the only thing that confirmed I wasn't losing my mind. Without it, all I had was the system's version of events. And the system was lying. December 14th, 3:47 a.m. This is the night I need to tell you about. Everything before this was preamble. Calibration. My mind adjusting to the frequency of whatever was wrong with this place. But December 14th is when the frequency changed. I was at the console. Gregor was on off rotation. Alone in the monitoring station, same as many nights before. Camera sweep was clean. Sublevel 1, normal. Sublevel 2, normal. Sublevel 3. S3, CAM04 was offline. Not static. Not glitching. The feed was black. A small text overlay in the corner read, S3, CAM04, NO signal. I checked the system log. The camera had dropped at 3:41 a.m. No cause listed. I cycled through the adjacent cameras. S3, CAM03, covering the corridor approach to C4, normal. S3, CAM05, covering the far side of the C4 entrance, normal. Both showed the C4 door. Closed. Sealed. Green light. But S3, CAM04, which was mounted directly above the door, the one camera that showed the door's full face, the indicator panel, and the first 2 feet of the door's interior frame, was black. I called the operations desk. It rang. And rang. And rang. 26 rings. I counted. No answer. I hung up and tried again. This time, the phone didn't ring. It connected immediately, and I heard a sound I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Breathing. Not mechanical. Not white noise. Breathing. Slow, measured, deep. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Operations. I said. The breathing didn't change. It didn't react to my voice. It continued at the same rhythm, the same depth, as if I hadn't spoken. Who is this? Inhale. Pause. Exhale. I hung up. The monitoring station was silent. The ventilation hum was there, but beneath it, in the gap between one mechanical breath and the next, I became aware of something I hadn't noticed before. A vibration. Very low. Not audible, exactly, I felt it more than heard it. In the desk. In the floor. In the chair beneath me. A slow, rhythmic pulse, like the building itself was breathing. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. I looked at S3, CAM04. Still black. Then text appeared on the screen. Not the standard system overlay. Different font. Smaller. Centered. Thank you for staying. It was on screen for 4 seconds. Then the feed resumed. Lab C, 4 door, closed, sealed, green light. As if nothing had happened. I looked at the console log. S3, CAM04 showed no interruption in service. According to the system, it had never gone offline. The landline rang. I stared at it. It rang 3 times. 4. I picked it up. Operations. We're showing a clean board across all sublevels. Anything to report? It was a normal voice. Male. Slightly bored. The standard late shift tone. No, I said. Clean board. Copy. Good night, Analyst. Click. I put the phone down. My hand was shaking. Not dramatically, a fine tremor, the kind you can see if you hold your fingers straight and look closely. I opened my notebook. I wrote down everything. The dead feed. The breathing. The message. The vibration. I circled it. Then, underneath, I wrote something I hadn't written before. A question. What is in Lab C4? I should have left. I know that. Looking back, the rational move was obvious. Finish the shift, drive back to Cheyenne, send an email, never return. People quit this job. Paige quit this job. It was allowed. Expected, even. The turnover rate for night analysts, I'd later learn, was around 14 months. But I didn't leave. And I need to be honest about why. It wasn't courage. It wasn't curiosity, not exactly. It was something more fundamental. It was the need to know whether I could still trust my own perception. The system had been telling me, for months, that what I experienced wasn't real. That the things I saw, the things I felt, the things I measured with my own senses, were artifacts. Glitches. Acceptable ranges. And every time I accepted that, I felt a piece of myself go quiet. If I left without knowing, I would spend the rest of my life wondering whether I was the kind of person who could be edited. Whose reality could be overwritten by a clean log and a calm voice on a phone. So I stayed. And I started looking for Lab C4's documentation. The facility's internal archive was accessible from the console, but only partially. Most of the research documentation was classified above my clearance. I could see file names but not contents. I could see project numbers but not descriptions. The index was organized by sublevel and room number, so I searched for C4. The results were strange. Lab C4 was listed in the facility directory as Environmental Testing, Long-Term Monitoring. Its status was active. Its access classification was Level 4, which was 2 levels above mine. But the creation date was wrong. Every other room in the facility had a creation date corresponding to the building's construction, 2014 or 2015, when Meridian built the complex. Lab C4's creation date was listed as 1987. The building didn't exist in 1987. I searched further. There were 17 file entries associated with C4. I could see their names. C4, ENV, 001 through C4, ENV 012. Standard Environmental Monitoring Reports. C4, BIO 001 through C4, BIO 003. Biological samples, maybe. I couldn't open them. C4, OBS 001. And C4, OBS 002. The OBS prefix wasn't used anywhere else in the system. Every other observation file I'd seen was tagged MON for monitoring or ANA for analysis. OBS was unique to C4. I clicked on C4, OBS 001. Access denied. I clicked on C4, OBS 002. Access denied. Then, beneath the denial message, a line of text I'd never seen on any other restricted file. This document has been requested 6 times in the last 90 days. I hadn't requested it before. That meant at least 5 other people, or the same person, 5 times, had tried to open this file recently. I checked the log to see who. The log showed no requests. January was dark in every sense. Short days above ground, though I rarely saw them. Underground, the light was the same at noon as it was at 3 a.m., the same flat, institutional white that turned your skin slightly gray and made the hours feel like a substance you were wading through. I began tracking the temperature drops more carefully. I brought a personal thermometer, a small digital unit, battery-powered, accurate to 1/10 of a degree. Each night, I clipped it to my belt when I did my sublevel 3 walkthrough. The console's sensors consistently read 58 degrees Fahrenheit in corridor C. My thermometer told a different story. January 7th, 1:15 a.m. Console, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Thermometer, 52.3 degrees Fahrenheit. January 9th, 12:50 a.m. Console, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Thermometer, 49.8 degrees Fahrenheit. January 14th, 2:30 a.m. Console, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Thermometer, 44.1 degrees Fahrenheit. The drops were getting lower. And they were happening more frequently. But here's what disturbed me more than the numbers. On January 14th, when my thermometer read 44.1 degrees Fahrenheit, I was standing directly in front of Lab C4. The air was cold enough that my breath was visible, thin wisps that hung for a moment before dissolving. The concrete walls had a faint sheen of condensation. And through the door, through the sealed, green-lit, access-restricted door of Lab C4, I heard something. Not the breathing from the phone. Not a mechanical sound. Not voices. A tone. A single, sustained tone, so low it was more pressure than sound. It sat right at the edge of hearing, in the range where sound becomes sensation. It pressed against my eardrums. It made my teeth ache. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds. The tone didn't change. Didn't waver. Didn't stop. I took one step back. The tone faded. One step forward. It returned. It was coming from inside C4. And it was directional, precisely, physically directional. As if it existed only in the space immediately in front of the door. A wall of sound, invisible, 2 inches thick. My thermometer read 41.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Then 39.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Then 36.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Dropping. Not slowly. Not in the gradual way that temperature usually moves. Dropping in discrete steps, like someone was adjusting a dial. I backed away. 5 steps. 10. The temperature on my thermometer climbed with each step. By the time I reached the elevator vestibule, it read 55.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Close to the consoles reported normal. I rode the elevator up. I sat down at the console. I checked S3, CAM, 04. Lab C4. Door closed. Sealed. Green light. Console temperature, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. And on the camera feed, the corridor in front of C4 was empty. But my thermometer, still clipped to my belt, still read 36.8 degrees Fahrenheit. It didn't return to room temperature for another 40 minutes. February. I was running out of ways to rationalize. The notebook was almost full. I'd started a second one. The circles had become so frequent that I'd developed a shorthand, a single dot for minor discrepancies, a full circle for major ones, a double circle for events I couldn't categorize. There were 7 double circles. I want to describe one of them. February 18, 4:02 a.m. I was reviewing the camera feeds. Standard sweep. Sublevel 1, normal. Sublevel 2. I stopped. S2, CAM, 09 covered the secondary lab wing corridor on sublevel 2. It was a long, straight hallway with 6 doors on each side. Standard view. Nothing remarkable. Except there were 7 doors on the left side. I counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'd walked that corridor hundreds of times. 6 doors on each side. 12 total. I knew their numbers, their labels, their functions. I knew the spacing between them, approximately 15 feet, center to center. On the camera, the left wall had 7 doors. And the spacing was the same. Which meant the corridor, as shown on the feed, was 15 feet longer than it should have been. I pulled up the previous night's footage for the same camera. 6 doors. Correct length. I pulled up the current live feed again. 7 doors. The 7th door was between Lab B2 and Lab B3. It had no visible label. No indicator light. It appeared to be slightly narrower than the standard doors, maybe by 6 inches. The color was the same institutional gray. I stared at it for a long time. At 4:07 a.m., the feed glitched. A brief stutter, less than a second. When it resumed, there were 6 doors. I rewound the footage. At 4:02 a.m., 6 doors. The 7th door did not appear on the recording. The live feed had shown me something the recording did not preserve. I put this in the notebook. Double circle. Then I sat very still and thought about what Gregor had said about Paige. How she'd kept a notebook, and then stopped, and then was calm, and then she quit. I thought about what it would feel like to stop writing things down. To let the system's version be the only version. To see 6 doors and accept 6 doors, even when you'd just counted 7. It would feel like relief. I understood that now. The weight of noticing was enormous. Every discrepancy was a crack, and through each crack came a cold draft of something I didn't want to face. But I kept writing. March 3, 2:22 a.m. The landline rang. I answered. Analyst Morrow. The voice was female. Not the usual operations tone. Slower. More deliberate. Please confirm your current location. Sublevel 1 monitoring station. Please confirm that you are alone. I'm alone. Gregor is on off-rotation. Please confirm that you have not accessed sublevel 3 this evening. I had accessed sublevel 3. At 12:15 a.m., I'd done my standard walkthrough. Badged in, walked the corridors, checked the doors, returned. The console had logged it. I did my standard walkthrough at 12:15, I said. Silence. Analyst Morrow, the console shows no sublevel 3 access on your badge this evening. I pulled up my badge log on the console. She was right. My log showed access to sublevel 1 at 9 p.m., the start of my shift, and nothing else. That's incorrect, I said. I physically walked sublevel 3 at 12:15. I checked every door in corridor C. The system shows no access. The system is wrong. Another silence. Longer this time. Analyst Morrow, I need you to confirm something for me. During your walkthrough, the one the system does not show, did you stop in front of Lab C4? My mouth went dry. Yes. For how long? Maybe 40 seconds. Did you hear anything? I didn't answer immediately. The question was wrong. Not the content, the tone. She wasn't asking because she didn't know. She was asking because she wanted to know if I knew. Yes, I said. A low tone. Subaudible. Pressure more than sound. Thank you, Analyst. Please do not access sublevel 3 for the remainder of your shift. Who is this? Operations. Good night. Click. I looked at the phone. I looked at the console. I pulled up the call log for the landline. No incoming call was recorded. The next 3 weeks, I didn't go to sublevel 3. Not because of the instruction. Because of something else. The morning after that phone call, when I returned to my apartment in Cheyenne, I found my first notebook on my kitchen table. The one I kept in my jacket pocket. It was open to the first page. I hadn't taken it out. I didn't leave it on the table. I'm certain of this because the notebook had been in my jacket pocket when I left the facility at 6 a.m., and I'd driven straight home without stopping. I reached into my jacket pocket. The notebook was there. I looked at the table. The notebook was there, too. 2 notebooks. Same cover. Same handwriting. Same entries. I compared them page by page, standing in my kitchen with my coat still on. Identical. Every entry, every circle, every timestamp. Down to the pressure of the pen, the slight wobble in my handwriting when I was tired, the coffee ring on page 14. Except, the notebook on the table had one additional entry. On the last page, in my handwriting, unmistakably my handwriting, was a single line. It knows you're keeping records. I put both notebooks in my car. I drove to a hardware store. I bought a small fireproof lockbox. I put both notebooks inside, locked it, and put the key on my keychain. That night, when I arrived at the facility for my shift, I checked the lockbox in my trunk. 1 notebook. The one from the kitchen table was gone. I know how this sounds. I know that if I were reading this, I would think the person writing it had cracked under the pressure of overnight shift work in an isolated facility. Sleep deprivation. paranoia. Pattern recognition run amok. I considered all of that. I considered it seriously. I made an appointment with a doctor in Cheyenne, a general practitioner, not a therapist, because I wanted blood work, not a conversation. My results came back normal. B12, thyroid, cortisol, blood sugar, everything within range. I was sleeping 6 hours a day, which wasn't ideal but wasn't crisis level for night shift work. I wasn't losing my mind. But something was happening to the boundary between what I observed and what was documented. And that boundary was getting thinner. March 29th. My last shift. I didn't know it would be my last shift. Nothing about the evening suggested finality. I arrived at 9 p.m., badged in, settled at the console. Gregor was my partner that night. He was quieter than usual, which I hadn't thought possible. He sat at his section of the desk, thermos in hand, eyes on the monitors, and said nothing for the first 2 hours. At 11:15 p.m., I started my camera sweep. Sublevel 1. Normal. Sublevel 2. Normal. 6 doors on the left wall of the secondary corridor. I counted twice. Sublevel 3. S3, CAM, 01 through S3, CAM, 03. Normal. S3, CAM, 04. Lab C, 4. Door closed. But the indicator light was not green. It was not amber. It was off. No light at all. The indicator panel above the door was dark. I'd never seen that before. Green meant sealed. Amber meant transitioning. Red meant breach. Dark meant. I didn't know what dark meant. It wasn't in any protocol. It wasn't on the laminated card. Gregor. He looked over. S3, CAM, 04. C4 indicator is dark. He leaned toward the screen. He looked at it for a long time. Then he leaned back. Log it as a bulb failure. The indicator panel is digital. There's no bulb. Log it as a bulb failure, Morrow. I looked at him. He was staring at the monitors, but not at S3, CAM, 04. He was staring at S3, CAM, 08. The far end of corridor C. I switched to that feed. The corridor was not empty. There was someone standing at the far end. Same position as the figure I'd seen in June. Same posture, arms at sides, facing the camera, motionless. Lab coat. But this time, the image was clearer. The cameras had been upgraded in October, better resolution, improved low-light performance. I could see the face. It was me. Same build. Same haircut. Same slightly forward-leaning posture I have when I'm tired, which I always was. The figure was wearing my jacket. My badge lanyard. My boots. It was standing at the end of corridor C, in front of storage bay 7, looking directly into the camera. And it was holding a notebook. Gregor. He didn't answer. Gregor, look at S3, CAM, 08. He didn't look. He stood up. He put his thermos in his bag. He put on his coat. Gregor. My shift ends at 6, he said. But I'm going to leave now. You can't just. Morrow. He looked at me. For the first time in the months I'd worked with him, his face had expression. Not fear, exactly. Something older than fear. Something resigned. When I started here, there were 4 night analysts. Not 3. The 4th was a man named David Rourke. He worked here for 2 years. He kept a notebook, too. He picked up his bag. One night, David went down to sublevel 3 to check on a camera discrepancy. He badged into the elevator at 1:14 a.m. The system logged him arriving on sublevel 3 at 1:15 a.m. He walked to the door. The system never logged him leaving. He stopped in the doorway. But the next night, when I was doing my camera sweep, I saw him on S3 CAM 08. Standing at the end of corridor C. In front of storage bay 7. Looking at the camera. He looked at me one last time. That was 14 months ago. He's still there. Every night. Same position. Same camera. And every morning, the footage shows an empty corridor. He left. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, then the elevator, then nothing. I was alone. I looked at S3 CAM 08. The figure, my figure, was still there. Still holding the notebook. Still looking at the camera. Then it moved. Not a large movement. Not a step. It tilted its head, very slightly, the way you tilt your head when you hear something unexpected. And it smiled. I don't want to describe the smile. I've tried, in the weeks since, to find words for it, and every attempt makes it smaller than it was. It wasn't menacing. It wasn't cruel. It was the smile of someone who has been waiting patiently and has just realized the wait is almost over. I closed the notebook. I put it in my pocket. I stood up. I walked out of the monitoring station, down the sublevel 1 corridor, up the elevator, through the lobby, out the front door, and across the parking lot to my car. I drove back to Cheyenne. I didn't stop. I never went back. I submitted my resignation by email the next morning. No notice. No exit interview. I expected pushback, a phone call, a legal threat, something about the NDA I'd signed. Instead, I received a one-line reply. Acknowledged. Your final paycheck will be direct deposited. Thank you for your service, Analyst Morrow. That was it. I tried to contact Paige. The phone number I had for her was disconnected. I searched for her online, her full name, her LinkedIn, anything. I found a profile that matched, but it hadn't been updated in 8 months, and the photo was gone. I tried to find Gregor. Same result. Phone disconnected. No online presence. I tried to find David Rourke. I searched every database I had access to, every public record, every social media platform. David Rourke does not appear to exist. I still have the notebook. The one I carried out of the facility. It's in the lockbox, in my closet, in my apartment, which I'm subletting month to month because I haven't decided where to go yet. Sometimes, at night, I take it out and read through it. The entries are all there. The timestamps, the circles, the temperature readings, the camera discrepancies. It's real. It's physical evidence that I was there, that I saw what I saw, that the system lied and I told the truth. But last week, I noticed something. The entry from December 14th, the one about the dead feed, the breathing, the message on the screen, has a detail I don't remember writing. At the bottom of that entry, below my description of the events, Below the circle, there's a line in my handwriting. They're not reading this. You are. I don't remember writing that. But the handwriting is mine. The pen pressure is mine. The slight upward drift at the end of the sentence, which happens when I'm writing fast, that's mine. I put the notebook back in the lockbox. I locked it. I checked it again the next morning. The entry was gone. The page was blank. And the notebook was 3 pages longer than it was before. I haven't opened it since. It sits in the lockbox, in the closet, in my apartment, and sometimes, usually around 2 or 3 a.m., when the world is at its quietest and my apartment settles into that specific silence that reminds me of sublevel 3, I hear something from inside the closet. Not breathing. Not a tone. A pen. Writing.